The floor is yours, Mr. Bruton.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm delighted to share a digital platform with Wolfgang. We've been friends for a long time. I'd like to talk about three things. Um, First of all, a big breakthrough that the European Union has made in not only providing over 1 trillion of a budget for the next 7 years, but also in agreeing to borrow on its own account, which gives the European Union new instruments for dealing with problems. Secondly, I'd like to say something, very little, about the weakness of foreign policy making by the European Union. And finally, given where I come from, I probably should mention Brexit if time permits. I think the EU capacity to borrow, which was agreed as part of the overall budget policy, is a huge breakthrough in institutional terms. Up to now, all the borrowing was done by member states. Now the European Union is going to be borrowing as well. This will go behind, as Wolfgang has mentioned, over 1 trillion euros of a European budget. And the disproportionate beneficiaries of this increase in EU funding are going to be countries such as Croatia, Greece, Bulgaria, and of course, Romania. In all of those cases, the benefit from this EU money could add up to 5% to the GDP of the countries in question. It's an act of solidarity on the part of the European Union, recognizing, as Wolfgang has pointed out, that COVID-19 increases inequality in our society and that the poorer a country may be, the more it will suffer. Now, obviously, if the EU is to have the capacity to borrow, it is also going to have the capacity to repay. And here, the detail is a bit hazier. There isn't a European Union tax agreed, apart from the idea of a waste plastic tax. We'll need to do a bit more than that. There's talk about a carbon border adjustment tax. There's talk about a digital tax, but both of those would run into some difficulty with our trade partners. There's also talk about how we might use the money collected in the carbon cap and trade system as a support for the EU. We have a lot of work to do in the European Union on all of those things. And we need to remind ourselves constantly that the European Union is a voluntary union. As we've seen with Britain, countries are free to leave. So we must work for consensus, to obtain consensus on all of those. And we should avoid, as far as possible, any country setting any red lines that prevent the European Union from reaching consensus. The next area where the European Union has got to develop, I think, its capacity is the area of common foreign and security policy. We see the difficulties here in the problems that Greece is having, for example, with its neighbor Turkey. There are problems with Belarus. There are problems with the behavior of our neighbor, the Russian Federation, as far as attacking people personally who are abroad. And the European Union needs to have a robust response. But the reality is, and this is the will of the member states, that foreign policy decisions of a material character can only be taken by unanimous agreement. And with 27 member states, the more member states you have, the harder it becomes to get unanimous agreement on any measure. Maybe we're going to have to look at strengthening the EU's decision-making capacity in foreign policy. Finally, I'll just say a word about Brexit. I won't go into the history of it, why it has happened. In a way, it would be fair to say that the United Kingdom was never a fully comfortable member of the European Union. They never really came to be thinking as Europeans. Europe was always somewhere else over there that they dealt with externally rather than something that they would describe as us or we. And as a result of that, they have drifted further away from the European Union and are now leaving. The exit of Britain from the European Union is going to lead to enormous increase in the amount of bureaucracy on any trade in or out of the United Kingdom. Forms to be filled, declarations about origin to be established, inspections to be endured. And the cost of all of that bureaucracy is ultimately going to be felt in higher prices, higher price consumers in British shops, higher prices for consumers in shops all over the European Union, including in my own country. And that's another challenge that we're going to have to face. The EU has made some budgetary provision to help countries worst affected by Brexit with the adaptation that they're going to have to make. We must maintain our faith in the European Union, as a unique example of a pooling of sovereignty for the greater good that has achieved enormous amounts, but has a lot more that it is capable of achieving. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruton. Again, very helpful comments there to get the discussion going.